Hello and welcome to the 2016 International Trade Forum, brought to you by Maryland, D.C. District Export Council. My name is Kelly Leonard and I am the moderator for today's event. I'm excited to be here to kick off this event, and I'd like to present to you a special guest who will be sharing some opening remarks. Before we introduce you to David Petter, just want to give you some quick background and point of reference. David Petter is the first President and CEO of the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, a new public-private enterprise here in our region. David joins MCEDC from the Central Florida Development Council, where he successfully transitioned that organization from a public-private partnership to a private organization while achieving record-setting job creation and capital investment results. We're excited to have David's unique talent and expertise here in Montgomery County. So help me welcome Mr. David Petter.
What a wonderful welcome. Thank you so much for having me today, and welcome to this very inspiring event. I know it'll be a day of learning and gaining expertise in developing our economy here in Montgomery County. As we've begun the EDC, well, we've been there for about 90 days now, and as they say, I'm drinking from the fire hose, and I see incredible opportunity for business development outside of Montgomery County. When you think about what we're going to do as economic developers at the MCEDC, we're going to retain and expand business, we're going to recruit and market for new business opportunities, and we're going to create an environment for innovation and entrepreneurship here in Montgomery County. I asked my team to pull together a few statistics that I thought would be inspiring not only to this group, but also the group that's watching this from far and away online and through broadcast channels. When you think about Montgomery County, you might not realize that 40% of our residents are bilingual. 32% of our population are foreign-born residents. That's really incredible to have that diversity. Out of the top 10 diverse cities in the United States, Montgomery County holds 4 of those spots, as well as the number 1 spot, which is Gaithersburg. There are more than 160 foreign headquartered companies that have a presence in Montgomery County. We have an unmatched location and offer proximity to 176 resident embassies and key U.S. and international decision makers and partners. Think about that access we have to that federal government here in Montgomery County. Some notable international companies that are here include GlaxoSmithKline, MedImmune, ProMedic Biotherapeutics, BAE Systems, Quigen, Thales Communications, Join Laboratories, and Sodexo, just to name a few. We are 2 hours or less by air from 60% of our North American market, which is pretty incredible. We're served, as you know, by 3 international airports, which allow us to reach 35 international destinations nonstop to 30 foreign countries, which is truly incredible when you think about that reach. Obviously, we have our ports, we have our strong talent, we have everything we need as far as assets to drive development on the international front and beyond. I'm very honored to be here today, honored to be among this group to help me drive development with our group at the MCEDC, and thank you for being here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, David. We received some really great letters from the congressional delegate, and I just would love to share with you a few opening remarks from Senator Cardin, as well as Senator-elect Van Hollen and Congressman John Delaney. So the first letter, a portion of it reads, "The impact of international trade is especially visible in my home state of Maryland." This letter is from Senator Cardin, which has 4 foreign trade zones as well as the Port of Baltimore. In 2014, the port, which supports nearly 60,000 jobs, oversaw 29.5 million tons of international cargo worth more than $52.5 billion. Every year, over 7,300 Maryland companies export materials to 209 countries through the port. And the Export-Import Bank alone supports $1 billion in international trade activity in the state. Additional comments, almost 800,000 Maryland jobs are dependent upon international trade, and the overwhelming majority of these businesses are small and medium, so you're in the right place. And finally, they all express their pride to support and ensure that all American small business, including minority-owned, veteran-owned, and women-owned businesses, are not only able to participate in federal contracting opportunities, but also have access to critical resources to capital needed to expand their businesses both domestically and abroad. So I definitely thank the congressional delegate for their support, and I know we have a representative of Congressman Delaney's office here in the audience with us. If we could just have you give a wave and stand so that everyone can see. So awesome. Thank you so much for your time and being here. Thank you to all of you that are here in the live studio, as well as those participating through the live stream. So now, the moment you all have been waiting for, the start of the panel. And so our first panel is going to focus on finding business beyond Americans' borders. During this time together, we'll highlight how companies can break into new foreign markets, specifically how these companies find opportunities, how they promote themselves, and how to ensure that they're doing business with the right people. And so to kick off this panel, I'd like to introduce to you our panelists. First, we have Carl Livesay. Carl is a longtime member of the District Export Council, serving currently as the vice chairman. An inaugural student of Export Tech, Carl has returned as an instructor and most recently an evaluator of the Export Tech business plans. He brings a unique perspective to the deck as a customer, an exporter, and a member. In addition to being Vice President of Operations for Lancia Manufacturing, Carl serves on a number of advisory boards. Next to him is Kimberly Brown. Kimberly is the founder and CEO of Baltimore County-based Amethyst Technologies. With offices in Tanzania and Ghana, the Amethyst team is changing the world by providing quality assurance, compliance services, and business process improvements for clinical trials, global health, manufacturing, biodefense, and research. In addition to serving on several boards and the President's U.S. Africa Business Council, Kimberly has created a nonprofit affiliate organization, Global Outcomes, which focuses on global health, STEM education, and economic empowerment. Welcome, Kimberly. Ciara Silkman is the president of Baltimore-based Hemas All International, a distributor of specialty detergents and industrial cleaning agents. The company currently has dealers and sub-dealers located throughout the US, Canada, Europe, and Asia. Currently, more than 75% of the company's business is overseas, and this year, the company is expected to more than double its 5-year average. In 2013, Ciara was appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce to serve a 4-year term on the Maryland, D.C. District Export Council. So welcome to our panelists. I want to kick this off by just sharing a general question that all three of you can feel free to answer. Briefly tell us about your business, and then also what are some of your greatest export challenges, and finally, how did you overcome some of these challenges? Carl?
Okay. Well, thank you, Kelly. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. I represent Lancia Manufacturing. We're a small aerospace manufacturer of complex geometry, close tolerance, assemblies, components, and products in Westminster, Maryland. We manufacture flight critical components for corporate aircraft primarily. And the second part of your question was?
What are some of your greatest challenges?
So for us as a business relative to international travel, our challenges are the regulations. Regulatory compliance is not that we are not compliant. It's not that we don't understand compliance. It's that we really don't know what we don't know. So we leverage the resources that are available through the federal government, through the state government, frankly, to keep us abreast. Because when you go into a new country or you're going to pursue a market that you haven't tried to address, there are certainly regulatory issues. You know, an apple is not always an apple. And then there's also cultural differences, and you have to be sensitive to the cultural uniqueness of the country that you're looking to market to. You don't want to come across as a brash American. You've kind of got to be it's much more of a soft sell, and it's a slightly longer process. So we rely heavily, frankly, on the coaching from other people that have gone through, gone down that path before us, and in particular, the people from the U.S. Export Assistance Center and the Maryland Commerce in their international trade area.
Awesome. Thank you. Kimberly?
Thank you and good morning. Amethyst Technologies provides engineering services. We provide quality assurance assistance for compliance to FDA regulations, for World Health Organization regulations and ISO. We develop software and improve systems for laboratories. 95% of our business until this year was U.S. Army support. We started in Montgomery County. Our first client was Walter Reed, where we provided services for vaccine development. And after 2 years as a prime contractor to U.S. Army, we were given the opportunity to run the malaria program in Tanzania. And for 7 years, as a small business, we ran a program where we trained medical professionals in East Africa. We developed strategies to roll out diagnostics programs, supporting critical malaria programs. So in 2012, when there were some challenges and with contracting, we looked at ways to expand our business overseas. We had past performance, we were setting up laboratories, there's a need for laboratories in Africa. So we saw an opportunity to expand beyond just providing services to owning our own laboratories, to really developing our footprint in Africa and using our talents to develop laboratories, pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities, and also medical centers in areas that need these types of facilities. We saw an opportunity in Africa, and the challenge was to raise funds. Initially, we looked in the U.S. to try to raise funds for 4 laboratories in West Africa, and we quickly realized it was going to be difficult. So what we were able to do is, in the 3 countries that we were initially starting our projects, we were able to identify local partners who wanted to invest in the programs. So now we're excited. We're in construction in Ghana. We're in design in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And we're moving projects forward with the help of the U.S. government and also with strong partners in the countries that we're working in.
Awesome. Thank you. Ciara?
Good morning. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having us. As was mentioned, my name is Ciara Silkman. I am the president of Hemas All International. We are a manufacturer and distributor of specialty chemicals, mostly used in the healthcare, electronics, pharmaceutical, food and beverage, and laboratory industries. We are based out of Towson, Maryland, and 75% of our business is overseas, mostly in Asia. We've been there for about 25 years, and we are continuing to grow over there. Some of our biggest challenges right now as we move into new markets and as we try to expand in Asia are, as Carl mentioned, regulatory is always a concern when you're a chemicals manufacturer, especially because OSHA, and there's lots of new regulations that are coming down the pike that are expanding not only in the US and Europe, but also in Asia. Another issue that we constantly are struggling with and is finding good partners and distributors overseas. That's of concern when you're a small to medium-sized company looking to expand. Another issue that we face quite often overseas is customs and shipping. Things have been changing in the customs and shipping area. There's new Incoterms. There's new things that we need to be aware of, especially when we're cross-shipping or trans-shipping goods from country to country. So those 3 are probably the largest, biggest issues, concerns, things that we deal with on almost a daily basis, quite frankly. Carl also mentioned you have to be concerned and aware of cultural differences. That is an issue for us as well, And language barriers, time zones are also another issue. And actually lately, one of the largest issues that we've been confronted with has been currency and currency fluctuations in the markets that we are dealing with and how that's affecting the US dollar. That's something that we are very, very focused on, something that we have been following quite closely, especially with what's going on in China, what's going on in Taiwan, and how that's affecting trade internationally.
So then, Ciara, you mentioned a number of challenges. How have you traditionally and or currently, how are you overcoming some of those challenges?
Oftentimes, when we face challenges, as I have mentioned, we work very closely with the DEC. We work closely with USIAC. We work closely with the Maryland Department of Commerce. We have representatives that will help us, guide us through those issues. They have a plethora of knowledge. They also have in-country representatives that we work closely with and that we can call and say, hey, we're having an issue with customs. Our stuff is stuck in customs, or we are having a problem with regulatory in China, or we're having issues with distributors fighting amongst themselves. How do we deal with this? And so we will go to our representatives that we deal with in these organizations, and they will help guide us through. It's been through these issues, and it's been extremely helpful. I can't stress that enough. We rely on them heavily. Like I said, we're an SME, so we are very limited in our resources, and we need those partners to help guide us through. DEC has also, District Export Council, has also been extremely important to us because there are lots of people on the DEC that have mentored us and that we've met with regularly who have experience in the areas that we're challenged in. And so they've been able to give us their guidance, they've been able to give us recommendations, and it's always good, and I like to stress this as well, it's always good to find a company that's slightly larger than you to be your mentor. And I can't stress that enough because we thought we could do it on our own for a little while, and then we met people who had more experience than us and realized, okay, we really need someone to help guide us through this process. And it is important to get connected with those folks, those organizations, and make sure that, you know, you're getting the help you need, because we're all in this together. We're all trying to grow. We're all trying to increase exports. And so it's really important to have those partnerships and those connections.
That's awesome, and thank you for making that comment, because I think the notion is that we're not all in this together. Like, if I share too much information, it may then impact my growth or my potential in the marketplace. So I think that's a wonderful point. Thank you for bringing that up. Now, Carl, back to you. As a manufacturer, what are some of the things that we should be considered prior to going international?
Well, one, that's a good question. One of the things is the profit margin. It's substantially higher for exported goods. And I can't stress that enough. The other thing is the market base is huge. 80% of the global market is outside of the United States. And depending upon your particular industry, it could be substantially larger. So if you don't look outside, then you're essentially putting a lid on your opportunity as a business. The other thing you should consider, frankly, is that foreign countries, they love American-made products. There's a real affection, and they will pay more for it. Part of that is because of the standards that are associated with manufacturing in America. Part of it's because of the regulatory compliance. The quality is just better, pound for pound. So you don't really have the hurdles relative to quality to go over or to overcome. But yeah, so I would say that it's the profitability, it's the market, and it's a better business deal because your competitors are coming from other countries and into America. So yes, it is offensive, meaning it's assertive from you to sell outside of the United States, but it's also a defensive move because with social media, with the internet, there really are no more boundaries. There's no more borders that you can't overcome. So if you don't address the international market, your competitors will.
Okay. And now, traditionally, most of us have this way of when we think of going global and competing internationally, we think more from a product-based business. I make widgets, and so I should ship them out. Now, Kimberly, you entered the market from a service perspective, right? It sounds like, though, now you're diversifying a bit more, and maybe you've got a product or something that you're delivering. But as a service provider, what's it like to export services?
It's very different. As a service provider, we have to become one with our clients, our potential clients and our existing. So we have to be very integrated. We have to have a presence in every country. We have to have local staff. We have to set up offices. So that's one of the big differences when you're a service provider. But as a U.S. company, again, like Carl said, we are welcome with open arms in every country that we have approached, because the U.S. is synonymous with standards and quality and laboratories. As a U.S. Army contractor, when we go into a country, they know we're going to do a good thing. We're going to leave something behind that's sustainable, something that meets all the standards, the U.S. standards, the international standards. So definitely we see an opportunity. And as a small business, when we go overseas, no one looks at us as a small business. We're Amethyst. They look at us for what we've done, what we can do, and the commitment that we have to each country that we're in. So if you're looking at a service, you have to really be prepared to have boots on the ground. I spend about 50% of my time in Africa, in multiple countries. Every other month I'm there. So that's the type of commitment that it requires as a service company.
Now let's stay on that for a moment, because you talk about traveling and the amount of time that you're there. What's it, and in Africa, it sounds like you work with a number of developing countries. And so as a small business, what's that like? So you've got the challenges of being a service provider, you've got the challenges of being a small company from the US perspective, but then you're serving developing countries. So what's that been like, working in developing countries?
It's very rewarding. When you come in as a so we are a U.S. contractor. We support USAID. We run an HIV program in Tanzania. U.S. Army, we run numerous programs for them. So we have that support where we have offices, we have staff that are local in East and West Africa. So the main thing is really relying on your past performance and your staff to really augment your presence. So, for example, supporting malaria programs. So we have worked with ministries of health. We work with military programs. So that gives us the knowledge, it gives us access, and it gives us past performance that we can use to leverage and really expand on the things that we want to do with building our own facilities.
Okay, awesome. Ciara, so hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah.
And because you're doing so much business internationally, if you could look through your crystal ball and do things a little bit differently, like what would you do differently, and or what recommendations would you make to people that are small businesses in particular that are looking to go global?
First of all, I'm going to start with what I would recommend. I'm a big proponent of practical solutions to problems. So let me give you a little bit of a formula for what we see as what you need to, what we would recommend that small businesses and medium-sized businesses do in order to be successful overseas. Number one, I would say make sure that you have a domestic business plan or a domestic model. Number two, I would say make sure you connect with the U.S. Export Assistance Center and go through their Export Tech program if you can. The Export Tech program is geared towards small and medium-sized businesses that are looking to go overseas or internationally, and they're going to help you put together a business plan for overseas or internationally. They're also going to help you figure out if your product or your service is a product or service that's one, can be exported, and number two, if it's going to do well in the countries that you're looking at. Because a lot of times as a SME, we'll look at a country and we'll say, oh, this is a great country, everybody's running there, it's expanding, there's a lot of business, let's go there. Well, that might not be the right market for you, or that might not be the right market for your product or your service. So the Export Tech program will help you really dig down, look at the nuts and bolts of your organization, and figure out, is the plan that you have in your mind really going to be successful for you in the marketplace? That would be my first two recommendations. Number 3 is, I would also, after you finish the Export Tech program, I would make sure you get a representative at USIAC to help you, or the U.S. Export Assistance Center. I would do a partnership search overseas. Once you have figured out which market you, 1, want to go to, and 2, it's going to be feasible for your company or your service that you want to export, they will help you find a viable, healthy, good partner. I stress that, because a lot of times people are going to come to you when you start going overseas, and they're going to say, oh, I'm a great partner, I can do this for you, I can do that for you, I will expand the marketplace exponentially for you, and that is not what happens. They hijack your product, they steal your intellectual property, they hijack your customers, they don't give you information, it becomes a nightmare, and I can attest to that because we had that issue happen to us overseas. So make sure that you work with them to find good partners and good connections overseas. That is extremely important. Another recommendation I would have is quickly get connected with the Maryland Department of Commerce. Sorry, they changed their name, so I have to make sure I say that correctly. Maryland Department of Commerce, because they have a grant program called the Maryland
Export MD.
Yeah, Export MD, sorry. I lost my train of thought. And that's a great program because it is going to help you go overseas. It's going to help you put the boots on the ground, like what was mentioned. Go visit the marketplaces, meet with the partners that USIAC has helped you establish relationships with. Export MD, we've actually been recipients of it twice. We've gone to different parts of the world. We've gone to Southeast Asia. We've gone to China. We've met with partners. We've expanded business. It's been a great program for us. It's actually a matching program, so you do have to put a little bit of funds up front, but they're going to match or reimburse the money that you put up front. It's a great program. You do have to apply for it, but I highly recommend it. If you follow some of these keys, or you test out some of these recommendations, I think you're going to find it's going to help you, because going international can be very frustrating, and the biggest thing that we had to learn is it is not a sprint. It is a marathon, and I see some people shaking their heads. I will give you an example. We started working with a company, we started getting introduced to a company 5 years ago. Okay, 5 years we've been working on this relationship. We are just now starting to make inroads to and starting to see some potential for sales. Now, when I say working with them, I mean like we are talking with them at least once a week, and giving them information, giving them products, giving them testing information. It's a real challenge to try to sometimes convert some of these international companies, because they want to vet you and you want to vet them and you want to make sure everything is working correctly. So it can be frustrating, and you really need to have some of these tools in your pocket in order to move forward.
So let's go back to something that you said, and I would like to pose the question to all of you, because I saw when I noticed you mentioned the word hijack intellectual property, I saw Carl shake his head like, oh boy. So have any of you experienced any sort of challenges around protecting your intellectual property? And if so, how have you addressed those challenges? Carl, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So yes, it is with some businesses internationally, it is a common business practice to replicate, steal, borrow, whatever phrase you choose to use. But the approach is they promise all these things that they're going to do, but here's what you've got to do first, which is basically kind of disclose the secret sauce associated with your products. And I've personally participated with several companies where this has happened, and in many cases, you warn them that you still need to keep that stuff close to the vest. American companies need to protect themselves. And so that's part of your decision, frankly, when you choose a country that you want to pursue as a new market. And that's one of the things that the U.S. Export Assistance Center does an absolutely fabulous job of. They'll help you identify countries that are stronger with the protection of intellectual property and where you have reach. But the U.S. Export Assistance Center, along with the District Export Council and others, will help you identify a legal team that can help you protect your intellectual property if you have intellectual property, heading overseas. But one point I want to make, international trade is a team sport. This is not something you're going to do on your own. And I can't say this enough. You need to, as a small business in particular, there are an abundance of resources available, and there's a fair number of them in the room. The U.S. Export Assistance Center, they're the go-to. And they're kind of the broker, if you will, of all the other resources there have been for us. Maryland Commerce does a very nice job. You've got the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, which has got a new international program that they're growing, and that's a very valuable resource, and they've got a reach that's a little different than anybody else. But there's also other organizations that are service providers here in the United States, and in particular in the area. I mean, you've got groups like SC&H as an accounting firm. You've got McGladrey. It's really okay to talk to those people and just ask for some advice and participate in the seminars and the working sessions that they offer, because you may only grab one or two tidbits of information, but that's huge. And then leverage the resources that you have. Like with the deck, we've got one of the companies that's a member of the deck is Washington Labs, and the gentleman's name is Mike Violette. If you have anything that's electronic in any way, shape, or form, and you're taking it anywhere outside the United States, that's somebody you need to talk to, because he can save you tens of thousands of dollars right quick and in a hurry. It's, like I said, it's a team sport. So the thing that I would suggest to companies is, frankly, get connected, network, and leverage the resources. It really is a team sport in every sense of the word.
Awesome. Kimberly, IP issues?
Definitely. So the first thing is trade secrets. You have to keep your trade secrets close. As a small business, you can't afford to litigate in multiple countries. If you look at the time it takes to litigate in the countries that we're working in, it's just, you'll never be successful if you're in that type of situation. Also, really understanding the laws in each country. Export.gov, when we first started looking at exporting, we research each country, so you can get information there. And then your partners. You have to have trustworthy partners. If not, you will not have a successful business venture. So using the Gold Key search that is provided by the Department of Commerce, Maryland Department of Commerce, where they can research your partners and provide information at no cost to you. We also use that system. And really also being present. Your partners, as a service company, our relationships are the most important thing. So we have to be at the table. We can't have anyone represent us. Every key meeting, every key event, we have to be there. So that's another thing. As a service company, you have to have time, FaceTime with all of your clients. No one can do that for you. So when you have those relationships, then you're not at risk for someone coming behind you and taking your clients and taking your business. So we really haven't had any problems because we have very, very good partners. And it's a very small world. For example, in Liberia, our partner, I found out after we met, he went to University of Maryland. He has an engineering degree like I do. He was in the U.S. Army. He served in Iraq. So in every case, we have these partners that they may live on the other side of the world, but there's some connection. We don't have any partners that we're not connected to in a real sense. So really work on your partners. And there are many, many good partners, many like-minded business professionals. So that's not something that has hindered us. We've actually used it as an advantage and have had amazing success with our partners who have brought land to our projects, they've brought cash to our projects. So it's really worked out well.
Now, Ciara, on the IP question, do you take advantage of any patents, or what types of ways do you work to protect your intellectual property?
Intellectual property is a very tough subject, especially when you're dealing with certain countries overseas. One of the things that I find very interesting is that our product has brand recognition overseas. And any slight change in any way, shape, or form, even to the packaging, a few years ago we changed the name on our label, and there was an uproar because they are very sensitive to knockoffs. They are very sensitive to anything that could potentially say your product or your brand's name on it, but not actually be your product or your brand. So we have to be very cognizant and aware of any changes we make in that regard. We haven't necessarily had any true issues with IP or anyone stealing patents or formulations or any of those types of things. However, one of the key reasons, and I think one of the most important things to do when you're going overseas with a product, is make sure you have distributor agreements in place. When we first started exporting about 25 years ago, everything we did was on a handshake before I came to the company. And that was all well and good back then, but the world has changed. Things have become more competitive. People are looking for an edge. And so about 10 years ago, we decided that in order to really make sure that we have a good handle on where our product is going, how our product's being communicated, and to make sure that we didn't have any IP issues, we put into place some very stringent distributor and partnership agreements. Now, these partnership agreements are probably about 25 pages long. They address IP, they address all sorts of patent issues, branding issues, and we have the partners sign those. And in return, they get certain perks, they get certain incentives, and vice versa. We get certain incentives and certain perks too. So there's a definite relationship building through the distributor partnership. At first I thought it was going to be a real problem. It was going to make it seem as if we didn't trust our distributors, we didn't trust our partners, but actually it's done the opposite. It's actually strengthened those relationships. So I would highly, highly recommend that. Make sure you have agreements in place. Don't take their word for it. Don't take a handshake. Make sure you have those agreements in place before you really start developing that relationship with those partners or those distributors.
So we're going to talk profitability for a moment. And while we're getting ready to ask this question, I invite the folks that are in the studio, if you have a question, feel free to proceed to the back of the room, and then we will allow you to come up to the microphone to ask your questions, so feel free to begin that process. But the question that I want to ask is, Carl, you alluded to profit margin and the benefits of international, going global, and from a profit margin perspective. How can small manufacturers overcome some of the cost barriers associated with going global?
That's a great question, and there are a lot. When we first started to explore international trade, there are a lot of barriers to success. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to sound like I'm throwing rocks at consultants, but you can find consultants everywhere that'll sell you the same information that the USIAC and Maryland Commerce will provide for you at no charge. Mm-hmm. When we were very fortunate to get connected with the U.S. Export Assistance Center, and they helped us navigate through the learning experience, and that's really the first step. And one of the things that Ciara mentioned was this export tech class. I can't emphasize that enough. If you have any interest in exporting at all, you really should take part in that class. It's very economical, and you're going to be exposed to people that are exclusively interested in your success. And that's what's unique, Kelly, about the U.S. Export Assistance Center. Their sole goal is to help you succeed. Mm-hmm. they're not billing you for the time. It's not a revenue generating activity. The same thing happens with Maryland Commerce. The same thing happens with the District Export Council, the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. And those people are very well connected and are very willing to provide you with the advice that you need to get started. Now, what they will do is they'll coach you. Now, notice I said coach and not do it for you. If you want someone to do it for you, yeah, you're going to pay full tilt and you're going to hire a consultant, and you can certainly do that, and that works too if you've got that kind of money. But what we did is we leveraged those resources, and then they helped steer us towards multifaceted events like international trade shows. In our business, we're in the aerospace and defense industry. We attend like the Paris Air Show and the Farnborough Air Show, and we do use the Export MD grant whenever possible. And by being part of the Maryland delegation, in our case, they help you. They act as an agent for you to help introduce you to targeted customers. So it's in our best interest and in small businesses' best interest to help those people understand as much as they can about your business, and they become an extension of your sales force. It's a force multiplier, really what it boils down to. And they've got people that are in country, and if you stay in contact with them, and we do, they're always on the prowl for new opportunities because they're trying to do the same thing you are, which is cultivate business for us as American companies. So I can't speak highly enough about those things. It is still expensive compared to domestic marketing, but it is nowhere near as expensive as it could be.
Awesome. First question.
Hi, my name is Zachary Carruthers. I'm with Training Essentials. My question to you all is, how can a company take their product and export it overseas and make it cost efficient for product testing?
Who'd like to take that one?
Can you explain a little bit about when you say make it efficient or make it
Like cost efficiency, like to make sure that it doesn't get too costly to send my products overseas to my international product testers.
So I guess the question I would have, I'll take that first. I don't understand why you would think that your product is too costly to be sold overseas, because in most cases, frankly, they'll pay more for it overseas than they will domestically. So the margins are higher, the retail cost is higher. That's a very common practice. So without knowing a little bit more about what your product is, if your product is a manufactured item, like a hard goods, I would certainly make sure that it was compliant, with the electrical specifications or the finishing requirements, those kinds of things. And you can use organizations like the one I mentioned before. Washington Labs does a great job of that kind of stuff. They can provide you with some of the advice. The District Export Council will help you find testing organizations. You do have to pay for it,
Of course.
because that's a service that's unique to you. But short of that, the margins and the retail costs, I wouldn't be concerned about the price of the item. I wouldn't start discounting it simply because you're selling it internationally. Not at all.
I was kind of more referring to the shipping of it, not the actual cost.
Transportation cost.
Yeah, the transportation cost, I should say,
That's
for that
a
exporting side.
That's a very good question. And the transportation costs are substantial depending upon the size of the product, but typically the customer will pay that.
Okay.
They pay the landing costs, so it's FOB. In our case, it's FOB our dock. So, we'll ship it however you like.
All right. Thank you.
I'd like to just add some things to that, because our product actually is very bulky. It's very, very heavy, and it costs us a lot to ship overseas just because it's so dense. We ship a powder, so you can just imagine how heavy that is and how costly that can get. I would recommend working with, where are you located?
Here in Baltimore.
In Baltimore, okay. There's some really great local freight forwarders
Right.
that can help you. I can throw one out right now. JS Connor, we work
Oh,
with
yeah.
them extensively. They will shop it around and try to find you the best rate. I don't recommend, depending on how big your product is and how heavy it is, we use primarily ocean freight. It's very inexpensive. Also, FedEx has a great program called FedEx Great Rates, and we will use them periodically as well if we have to get something air freighted quickly and inexpensively. So if you call them and you ask for a representative and you say, I'd like to learn more about the FedEx Great Rates program, What that program is that they will give you, if you're not extremely time sensitive, like you can ship within, say, like, oh, I can ship in this window, 10-day window, it doesn't matter what day, it doesn't matter when, they will find you the cheapest rate on an airline, one of their airlines or their airplanes, and ship it overseas for you. And it's very, very reasonable. We've been using it for about 5 years now. I would highly recommend it. It's just a fraction of the cost of what it would cost you to air freight. So those two resources, I think, would be very helpful to start with. And if you want to talk more about some other freight forwarders that we use, because we've used lots of different ones with lots of different pricing, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about that later.
Can I offer one more point? One of the things, if your product is large and bulky, and Ciara brought up a really good point, make sure that your freight forwarder is pushing that freight through the Maryland port. If it's at all possible, go through the Maryland port, because one of the things that we've learned is your freight forwarder gets commissions that are substantially different from neighboring ports. So the local port is typically not the one they make the most money on, because the competition's the greatest. Okay,
Makes
so
sense.
if you just give your product, now Connor doesn't do that. They're a local company, and they I know those people very well. They're just phenomenal people to do business with. But some of the others will route your freight through Pennsylvania, or down south, down even into Georgia, because they get more money to do that, and it costs you more. They're passing along those costs to you, but they get a much more significant level of compensation as opposed to going through Maryland. So I would push to have your product exported through the Port of Baltimore. Port of Baltimore is one of the top ports in the country, and they're very, very competitive, and ask for justification why it can't go if it's a bulky product.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Next question.
Good morning. Ashok Kapoor from Hawkeye Medical. We are a medical equipment supply provider trying to start exporting. If you could, there are so many countries out there where you could export. How did you find the very first country to export to build your reputation? Then you can expand to other countries.
So for us, it was a country that we had a strong connection with. We had a partner, someone I went to school with, who was in Ghana. So that made it much easier, was well connected, was in business. So really, you have to have somebody who can, facilitate what you need in the local country. And then you have to have a country that is open to doing business with you. So really, doing your research, looking at who your competition is, just like you do here. Developing your business plan is key in any country. And there's also, export.gov, you can look at, the Commerce has done a really good job with, all the details with, each particular country. Also, World Bank, we use World Bank and CIA fact books. They have current, 90-day information. So it even changes based on what's going on in, the country, the political risk. So those are the three sources that we use to really look at the country and determine if it's a good fit.
I would also say, see if you can find a domestic partner that ships overseas and has presence overseas already, because that's actually how we started about 25 years ago. We had a relationship with a domestic partner who was doing business overseas, and that is how we first got our feet wet. And it was a lot less traumatic because we dealt with them here in the US and they dealt with the foreign partners overseas, and so we were able to communicate with them real time. They were able to field any issues overseas. And there's a lot of, since you're in the medical field, there's a lot of small, medium-sized, and large medical companies that are shipping overseas. Just a few of the ones I can think of, like BWR, Cardinal Health, Medline, places like that. So if there's any way that you can get connected with them, they'll help you get your products overseas when they have orders for overseas products. The other thing to also be aware of is possibly if there's any way to become a subcontractor on a GSA contract. That'll help you get your product overseas too. And there's lots of databases online and lots of different places that you can look that they'll say, this is what we're looking for, this is the time frame, and submit your bid, submit your contract or whatever, and they'll look at that. So that's another way to do it, instead of trying to do it on your own automatically, just going over. Sometimes you can be successful that way too, but we found that having that domestic relationship first helped us overseas, and then once we got over there and our brand was kind of building itself, we thought, okay, we're going to go direct now. So then we went direct, and that really helped us.
Charlie, you want to go?
Yeah, we use the U.S. Export Assistance Center because they know where all the bones are buried. And frankly, they recommended to us, based on the products that we were manufacturing, that we go after the UK. And I will tell you that shipping to the UK is like shipping to Pennsylvania. It's really no more difficult. Depending upon, so while you're learning about exporting, start small. Start with a more friendly country, where there's more of a reciprocal agreement. And frankly, the advice that they'll give you, or that they gave us, was look for ones that had a fewer number of restrictions and were more attracted to commerce back and forth with the U.S. And for us, that happened to be the U.K., and then there were several other countries after that. But the U.S. Export Assistance Center can help you with that enormously, which is where the information from export.gov comes from. It's just they've got people in the country, and they'll be. It's ridiculous how supportive they'll be if you'll expose, your business to them, and if you spend the time, if you'll invest the time with them, for them to understand your business, they become an advocate for you globally. It's like an extension of your sales force.
So you mentioned friendly country, like you mentioned the UK. So are there others on that sort of short list? I know the state of Maryland, we have sister cities. Would they be considered like friendly countries?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
At least not in our case. Okay. So we manufacture aerospace products, but we also do defense products. And if you think it's hard to export medical equipment, you should try taking missile parts out of the U.S. Right? So you have to look at a lot of the other indicators. All right. So in our business, the UK was one. Turkey, believe it or not, is friendly. There's Brazil, although Brazil's got a very strong manufacturing base, so they don't really import a whole lot. And then from the UK, we started to spread out into other countries within the European community. Italy is good, and that's just for us, for the types of products. So we looked at who had the need, and in particular, we looked at the indicators that were provided by the U.S. Export Assistance Center as to whose markets are growing, what are the budgets, what's the defense budget, what's the aerospace budget, who's building what, and where do we have something to sell. And then with that, we had the commercial service agents, and they've got them all over the planet. Those folks are phenomenal. That is their business. A lot of people don't realize everything that goes in or out of those countries goes across the desk of the commercial service agent or officer. So they have a lot more pull in country than you might think. So if they tell you that, these are good people, if they tell you this is a good place for your particular product, take that as gospel.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
It's a nice looking tie.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Chris Majuru, and I'm a consultant for Liberty Approach and Allied Consults, president and founder. www.libertyconsults.com. My question is for Ms. Kimberly Brown of Amethyst Technology. You deal with, I guess, medical technology as far as pharmaceuticals technology in different neighboring, different African countries, Tanzania and so forth. How did you get the? I wanted to know how did you get the? How do you work with that when there's limited, in some countries there's limited infrastructure in place to get these technologies off the ground? How did you overcome that?
That's the good thing about being a defense contractor is you have to be able to deal with power, water, roads, lack of capacity, human resources.
Exactly.
So that became our area of expertise, going into rural places and developing healthcare to U.S. FDA standards to support a vaccine trial. So that's one of the benefits as being a defense contractor, is those are the normal things that you have to deal with, logistics. So we use our expertise, our experience in that fashion to expand to working with African governments. We're setting up a cancer center in rural Kenya with U.S.-based partners, building these laboratories. So again, having experience, like I think we've all mentioned, finding a way in, leveraging something that you're good at, leveraging, and identify, connecting the dots, your strengths with a need, and that's really what we've done. So there are many ways for partnerships. For example, if infrastructure, these countries, there's hospitals, there's laboratories, there's schools. Everyone is managing with the existing infrastructure. So really understanding how things work, spending time on the ground, and really being able to do things differently. One of the challenges is a U.S. company, we're used to certain systems here that work very, very well. But when you go to other places, there aren't necessarily the same types of systems.
That's right.
So being able to adapt, being able to really look at the big picture, being able to creatively find ways to be efficient. So that's really the challenge we have. And as an engineer, we're engineers, so we're used to problem solving. We actually like that. I mean, that's what we like to do. So we took something that's a challenge and made it our core business's challenges.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we're coming to the end of our time together. And so for those of you that have questions, we'll take one more question, but then keep in mind that at the end of our formal program, we will have a networking session as well. So you'll have an opportunity to ask more questions of the resources that are here.
Hi, good morning. My name is Anthony Goodsmith from Standard Medical Systems, and we're also in the healthcare field. We also are a veteran-owned small business for about 10 years. So we would definitely like to find out what are the barriers to exporting. We have two countries in mind, in West Africa and Ivory Coast, Benin, Togo, Equatorial Guinea, and also Brazil. We have some distributors that we have made agreements with. I know you made that an important point. We have that in place, and we also have some agreements with the VA and DoD market. So my question to you are, what are some of the barriers to selling medical equipment, pharmaceuticals, diagnostic devices, etc.?
Cost. Understanding who buys. So in the U.S., there's health insurance and there's a system. In many of the countries you mentioned, everything is out of pocket. So also donors, ministries of health depend on donor funding. So really understanding who buys, that was kind of the wake-up call for us, because we know there's a need for our services. And I think we've been in 13 African countries, and we've met with leadership and ministries and commercial services. We've met with everyone in these countries. And at first, we weren't moving forward the way we thought that we would, because we know that there's the need. And then we quickly realized who buys. So in many countries, USAID is providing 40–50% of the health budget. So if you understand that, then instead of marketing necessarily to the government, it needs to go to USAID. So health is very, very different because it's donor funded. It's DFID, it's USAID, it's World Bank, it's Global Fund. So really understanding who buys the particular equipment, the drugs that you're really trying to sell. If they're in TB, HIV, malaria, that's Global Fund. If it's hypertensive drugs, if it's diabetes, then that would be the local government. So it takes a little bit of research really to understand who exactly is buying. And then who is your competition? Many of the countries that we work in, the main competition is Chinese companies and Indian companies when it comes to health. That's pretty much across the board. So you have to be able to beat those prices if you're going to sell to the local government. So health is an interesting and challenging area.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and thank you, Carl. Thank you, Ciara. This has been a very a conversation rich with content and information. If I could wrap us up by saying one statement, I think Carl alluded to it best. International trade is a team sport, I guess. And if we can reflect on the Brazilian Olympics, we are Team Maryland, and that means we are going to go for the gold. Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in online and here in the room. This